Hello and welcome to It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Joining me today is Michael Holden, Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist for the Business Council of Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about labor numbers. Stats Canada came out the other day with its latest labor force survey. In Alberta, the numbers showed that 10,800 jobs were lost in November. In terms of year over year, employment is down 122,500. And the unemployment rate in November rose to 11.1% from 10.7% in October. So, Michael, tell me what your thoughts on those numbers and what they signify and show.
Well, there's not a lot of good news in those numbers for sure. I think not only did the province lose the 10,800 jobs that you mentioned, but all of those job losses happen to be in full-time positions. And so we lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 29,000 full-time jobs, and those were offset by an increase in part-time employment. And so that's, it just speaks to the struggles that the province is facing and that this is a long road to recovery for Alberta. These are trends that we're seeing in other prairie provinces as well. And provinces that have seen a significant outbreak or a significant second wave in COVID cases are the ones that are being hardest hit. And so we're just, it's a setback on the road to recovery.
Okay, and we look at Calgary-specific numbers, actually for the Calgary census metropolitan area. In November, there were 10,700 jobs gained. However, year over year, we're down 17,900 jobs. And the unemployment rate is 10.7%, which is down a little bit from 11.3 in October. What do those numbers show for Calgary region?
Well, it's a little bit trickier when you look at cities for a couple of reasons. The main one is that the way that employment and unemployment is calculated is slightly different. So when you look at city level data, because it tends to jump around so much, they end up looking at a 3-month moving average. So that reflects also what happened in the last couple of previous months as well. And so it's a good news story. I mean, you want to see jobs coming back versus jobs being lost. I think that numbers like that we have to take with a bit of a note of caution, just partly because of that moving average problem, and partly because we do know that we've heard a number of relatively high profile layoff announcements within the province in the last couple of months, and those are going to be filtering through into the numbers in the coming months.
Yeah. Now, when you look at Alberta, the current COVID situation, we're into the second week now of the most recent restrictions, and there's obviously fears out there that we're going to get even more restrictions coming because those COVID numbers aren't going down. What's your fear of what that might do to the employment picture in the province?
Well, I think that it's not going to be positive, unfortunately, and I think that it's also worth noting that based on when StatsCan does their survey for these labor force numbers, is that those job losses you talked about earlier, those don't reflect the most recent wave of shutdowns. Even the first one, there was a more modest shutdown, and then a larger one that came a couple of weeks after. Both of those took place after this labor force survey had taken place. So I think that it's reasonable to assume that we're going to see continued flat employment growth, if not additional declines when December's numbers come out. And so, like I said before, it speaks to the challenge that businesses are facing and that Albertans are facing. And so I think businesses are doing what they can to continue to function and to keep their employees safe, and they're going to do as much as they can. But as COVID cases rise, people are going to be more reluctant to go out. There are additional restrictions in place, and I think that we're going to see that reflected in the employment numbers once December and January numbers roll around. But that's in a sense part of what we have to do. I mean, if we take short-term job losses, it's going to hurt a lot of people, it's going to hurt a lot of businesses, but it could be better in the long run to take that sort of short-term pain if we can actually succeed in getting these case numbers down.
Now, Michael, one last question I had for you. As you look at the economic picture right now in the province, has anything changed from your perspective in terms of looking ahead into 2021 and what to expect from the province from an economic forecast? Has anything changed with the way the current environment is right now?
Well, it's really hard to say, and so, economists sometimes can be guilty of couching their expectations of what's going to happen because they're always accused of being wrong because you're, driving, looking through the rearview mirror. And it is exceptionally difficult right now to say what's going to happen because so much of it depends on what happens with COVID cases and what happens with vaccine rollouts. I think that, the general expectation is that, if you look back at the labor numbers, they provide a good example of what we had expected. And that was you saw this sharp decline and a fairly sharp increase to go halfway back up. And then after that point, things had kind of leveled off and now they're starting to dip back down again. And so I think that, once we get through this sort of short-term dip, we'll expect to see a continued gradual recovery into next year. There are some bright spots. I think, certain industries haven't done as poorly as others. On the services side, financial, the finance sector has been doing pretty well in the province. On the goods side, we've seen, good news in agriculture in terms of economic growth and in forestry as well. Those two particular areas have had exceptional years. It's been a great crop year. It's been a great year for forestry prices. And so those are going to be some of the optimistic points that we're going to see going into the future. Plus the provincial government has had a number of incentive plans to try to attract more investment in petroleum, in plastics rather, sorry. And so that's to the extent that those are successful in attracting investment to the province, and I think they probably will be, we'll start to see some additional activity, some additional natural gas pipelines for electricity generation to displace coal. Those major investments are going to help spur some economic activity. And so those are where the positive points are that we're seeing. But those have to be taken in the context of a generally otherwise slow recovery.
Okay, super. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today, Michael.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, that was Michael Holden, who is Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist for the Business Council of Alberta. This has been It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Thanks for joining us today.